Welcome back to the New Zealand Property Podcast and Video Series. I'm Mark Honeybone and I'm from Property Ventures Real Estate, who sponsors this show, bringing you up-to-date information in the property world of New Zealand. And sitting next to me, I've got Sarina Gibbon from the Auckland Property Investors Association.
Investors Association, yes.
Investors Association?
It's a mouthful.
A mouthful, it is a mouthful.
We just say APIA, let's be,
I say APIA, but people get it mixed up with other places around the Pacific Island and what have you, but that's all good. And obviously there's PIAs all around the New Zealand, and Sarina is the GM of the Auckland one.
Yes. Thanks for having me.
No, welcome. We welcome you here, and we love having you around and on the show and informing people about property. So
cool.
And this is a very important one we're talking about today. As I said, one of the things we do is bring up-to-date information to the listeners and watchers of the show. And one of the important things right now is probably more important than anything that I've seen in far as being a landlord in the last 10 or 15 years is the new Residential Tenancies Amendment Bill that's going around the government at the moment and around New Zealand. And a lot of people have heard different things about it and what have you, but there's a lot of unknowns about there, and it is bigger than probably most people think and more important than most people think, and that's what today's show is about, having you here to bring you the facts of what it's actually about.
It's a meaty piece of legislation which we think landlords can't afford to not be aware of. So thanks so much for the opportunity.
No, that's good, and I suggest you all listen in hard, and we'll start off right at the start of the background, I guess, of how this come about, what the timelines are, because it's not very far from there, I know.
Yeah.
And what, why is it so important for the listeners to listen to this thing?
Sure. So this piece of legislation is called 2181, the Residential Tenancies Amendment Bill. It was introduced to Parliament around about middle of February, and the sort of overarching objective of all the changes that is proposing the entire bill is to, number one, increase security of tenure primarily for tenants, even though they've not been explicit about that. And secondly, to empower tenants by giving them more control within their rental home, within the rental market, and also the residential tenancies rental system. And thirdly, there's this very overarching goal of modernizing New Zealand rental law, even though the government hasn't been terribly explicit around what modernization means or looks like, but they have referred to other countries, other cultures and countries to say these are the models, the type of renting system that we are aspiring to and sort of hope to replicate. Now, in terms of timeline, I've just mentioned that the bill was introduced on the 17th of February, and currently it is sitting with the Select Committee. Yep. I believe it's Social Services and Community Committee, I think that's what it's called, the SSCC. But anyway, what landlords need to be aware of is the bill is open for public submission until midnight Wednesday, 25th of March. So that's definitely a key date to jot down. After which the committee will go through the submissions. It will also take oral submissions, so they'll go around the country and give people the opportunity to come along, dialogue with the committee members. They'll put all of that information together, report back to Parliament by the end of June, and tweaks will be made. The bill will go through a second reading and a third reading before receiving royal assent. And the intention is, and it's spelled out in the bill, that once the bill receives royal assent, it will become enforceable, it will become law 6 months from the date of the RA. Right. So something to be mindful of, number one, the Select Committee process has definitely been shortened quite significantly. So usually the SC process takes about 6 months. This one is 4.
What's the reason for that, do you know?
I think Labour wants to be re-elected. I think Labour is pitching itself to be the party for tenants. Yeah. And we can go all days around whether it should or shouldn't, but that's the position they've taken. It's a very sort of ideological pursuit, strategy wise. So I think, look, we have a window And I think it's worthwhile for not just landlords, but also tenants, which will cover some of the issues that's not going to be terribly great for tenants as well as people in the community who live in the neighborhood of renters. So neighbors all around the area, you will be affected by this bill. So there is an opportunity to push back on it, give some constructive feedback to help the government achieve the objectives of security of tenure, empowerment of tenants, and modernising New Zealand law. I think there's definitely ways to do that, but we don't agree with how they're going about doing it.
Yeah,
so,
and it's and there's some, well, you'll talk about that soon. I think it's not just the tenants and the landlords. Like it's people always seem to think it's tenants versus landlords. It's not, and obviously they want us to work in harmony and what have you with that. But it's also, this affects not only the landlords, it also affects neighbours of properties, which we'll talk about again soon. So it's an important topic for everyone to be involved in, and put your submission in. So the timeline you spoke about is the 25th of March, which is two Wednesdays' time.
Yeah. At the time of filming, 25th of March, you have until then to put in a submission. But look, between now and even, I want to say even maybe the second or third reading in Parliament, you can do other things like ring your MP, write them an email or a letter to say, I'm terribly concerned. How are you going to vote? Are you going to vote yes or no to this bill? Because potentially my vote in September is going to hinge on your decision. So I think don't get into the mindset of it's just submission or bust. Like there are other things you can do to push back against this bill. Yeah.
Okay, right. So on the bill, then, what are the
big ticket items?
Big ticket, so you're big ticket item.
So many.
I mean, everyone's talking about the 90 day. Is it 90 days? Is it not? How you can get rid of the tenants if they're not being a model citizen or causing strife to your property.
And I gotta say, I'm personally, I'm inherently uncomfortable with sort of commenting about the RTA by having a singular focus on termination. Because if you look at the reality of investing in a property, the reality of a landlord is we want long-term tenants who's going to pay rent on time, look after our property. So I don't think anyone really 100%. Ever gets into this business to say, how do I terminate, or how do I make a tax loss? I mean, I think the angle in which we're tackling these debates, I think, needs to be looked at. But anyway, going back to your question, big ticket items. I understand from Mark that you have kindly agreed to link in the show notes some of the resources we've developed to help people understand 2181. And so this is by no means an in-depth coverage of exactly what all the changes are. But big things you need to be aware of, there's going to be dramatic changes around the way termination is going to work, especially vis-a-vis the landlord's right to terminate. So the most talked about one is it's proposing to take away the landlord's ability to give a 90-day notice to terminate without explicitly stating the reason. And the reason you state has to fit within the criteria. So 90-day notice to terminate, out of the window. Notice periods around terminating for property going on in the market, properties, the landlord's family moving back in, that sort of stuff. There are changes there, so be aware of that and read our explanatory notes over that. Second big thing to be aware of, the landlord's control of how a fixed term tenancy rolls into a periodic tenancy at expiry. So that's being diminished quite significantly in our opinion, and whatever the government is proposing to take away from landlords, they're giving it to the tenants. So you need to be aware of that too. Now, things like rent bidding is out the window. I understand if mainstream media is to be believed, that used to be a common practice in Wellington before it was exposed,
I believe
maybe.
So, yeah.
I don't think that, anecdotally, we're not aware of that being a phenomenon in Auckland.
I think some landlords just taking advantage of that when the market's been very hot, the rental market's been hot.
And I think speaking on behalf of the Auckland Property Investors Association, there is an element of distastefulness in that. So we don't have a problem with rent being out of the window. Things like rent increases, the regularity is being lowered to once a year rather than twice a year. Again, not something landlords lose sleep over. There are things around giving tenants the ability to make minor changes in the rental property, in the rental home. So things like putting up shelves, that sort of stuff, generally don't have a problem. We would like to see the wording of the clauses being a little bit tighter around health and safety and sort of that sort of obligation. What happens after that? Things around there's the also changes in the tenancy tribunal having the ability to order name suppression in cases where a claimant or a respondent is largely successful and requests the suppression, or if the tribunal considers it in the interest of fairness and public interest to grant suppression, that could happen as well. There's the obligation to consent to and facilitate fibre installation at the rental property. Again, not a massive thing that people lose sleep over. Another thing to be mindful of is the introduction of the infringement offence regime, so which adds another layer to unlawful acts, and that sort of would operate in conjunction with the unlawful act regime. So you're looking at increased penalties and a different type of financial penalty in that space as well. So, but definitely, if you're interested in knowing more CL and details of this bill, go to the link in the show notes. There's a 7-page explanatory notes we've put together for landlords to go through.
So one of the things you just mentioned were about the fixed term tenancies. Now, back when I knew all the rules very well, which I don't know now, Sarina, it was you had your fixed term tenancy, it finished, and then went straight on to a periodic tenancy.
Yes.
So that will obviously change with the proposals they're looking at.
Yes and no. So I'm glad you asked this question, because it is something people need to be mindful of. So right now the law says that when you have a fixed term tenancy, at the end of that fixed term tenancy, if no notices are given, that tenancy rolls automatically into a periodic tenancy. If, for example, the one of the party to the tenancy, i.e. the landlord or the tenant, decides during that fixed term that they do not want the rollover to happen, all they need to do is give a unilateral notice to essentially, I mean, they say to terminate, but essentially it's to discontinue on expiry. Right? So what the bill is proposing, when I talked previously about taking that control away from landlords, is that landlords will no longer have the ability to give that unilateral notice. Meanwhile, the tenant retains that ability. And from our point of view, there is real life consequences, like business consequences, to this subtle shift in the balance of control. Because let's say, for example, December is a tricky month for everybody, really, in the renting space. People are on holiday, there are not as many tenants looking for properties. Landlords, landlords don't want to be sticking around putting people into their rentals. So what a lot of landlords do, which I think is entirely reasonable, is to ensure that they enter into a fixed term that covers that Christmas, New Year's period. So essentially, if you're saying you no longer have control over how you treat the way the fixed term rolls over, and you're giving tenants all of that, then you're really relying on the tenant to not only act in good faith, but also accommodate some of the business challenges be prepared to accommodate some of the business challenges that
obviously a lot of headaches with that for landlords straight away. I know, and a lot of people in Dunedin or university places have it finished in January or end of January, because it covers that break you're talking about. Place like Wellington, Auckland, people go there, they start in the year, they want it to finish at that time. But for me, it's just like a very commercial decision. It's like a commercial lease. Like if you get a 1 + 1 year. That means the tenant in a lease situation has the choice of going on, but the landlord doesn't have the choice of extending another year. Where now you're saying with the tenancy, if they're doing that, you've got it fixed to a certain date, and you're going to have, as I say, commercial plans to do something with that property after that. You can't plan anything because the tenant can stay on. It's a fixed lease for 1 year might be a 1 year plus life
Well,
in a reason until they come up with an agreement.
Look, first of all, I'm pleased you mentioned commercial lease, because there is definitely, if you look at this from a very sort of top-down level, there is the sense of moving residential tenancy more towards a commercial lease situation, but only for tenants. So if you look at this, a lot of these changes speak to giving tenants more control and more rights, but in the meantime, either keeping the landlord's control and rights at the same level or even diminishing it. So like in principle, we don't object to moving more towards a commercial lease principle, like way of doing things, but it's got to be fair. It's got to be exactly. So we just think the imbalance needs to be addressed. Now the second thing you mentioned, which I'm picking this bone with you. So look, you mentioned lifetime tenancy. I put to everyone listening out there, we ought to be very careful about the way we infer lifetime tenancy from combining the effects of taking away the 90-day and taking away the control of fixed-term tenancy, and then surmising that therefore it must lead to lifetime tenancy. And we've done a massive blog, again that's going to be linked in the show notes, and we've done a massive article analysing would that actually be the case. Generally, no, I don't think landlords are at risk of being locked into a lifetime tenancy. I think what we're talking about is we're at risk of becoming vulnerable to the tenant's whims and control over who stays on in that rental property. Because if you want to say, okay, 90-day notice plus fixed-term tenancy must mean lifetime tenancy, a lot of things still have to happen for lifetime tenancy to occur, because there are still mechanisms under in the bill that allows a landlord to exit out of the tenancy. Mechanisms like rent arrears, antisocial behaviour, property being on the market, the tenant dying, you know. So you're to say that there is definitely going to be lifetime tenancy, you're counting on none of those mechanisms being able to be kicked in, or the tenant being so malicious, acting with such bad faith, and has the means and opportunity to explore every single loophole in the system in order to stay in that property without having to perform his or her obligations, then I just think that's an extreme example. And if we're just talking about the norm, no, it's not gonna. We're not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
So
no.
Pet gripe. Glad we can talk about that.
Very good. Right, what now?
I think it is also important to talk a little bit more around these rules of terminating for antisocial behaviour and rent arrears. So would that be? That was the. Are you happy with that?
Because that's really the crux of the whole thing, as far as I'm concerned.
That's the most talked about.
As you said, it's the most talked about, but it's. As you said, we ideally would have one tenant for the whole time we own the property, and it all runs smoothly. That's what landlords want.
If they want to, if they keep paying the rent, look after the property, keep agreeing to every single legal rent increase, and keep performing those obligations, what's the problem?
Great, perfect world, but obviously the world's not perfect. And it's a few tenants give, for landlord side of the fence, I guess, it's like any part of the world, there's a few tenants that give a bad name for all tenants. There's a few landlords give a bad name for all landlords also at the same time. But when you do have those bad tenants, you want to have rights so you can protect your property, which is your asset, which is helping New Zealanders live in. So how and what the antisocial rules, whatever it's called.
I'll tell you what, this I personally feel very bad faith, bad faith. So when I believe it was 2018, the then newish Labour government came out and said, look, we're going to reform the residential tenancy, and they did this massive consultation process, and part of that consultation talked about removing the 90-day notice. what followed was there was a lot of pushback by landlord groups and other community groups around, you have to preserve the 90-day notice because they are most commonly used in cases where the tenant is behaving in an antisocial manner, and that is creating a threatening environment for landlords to deal with them normally. So then, in response to that, I think to me, the antisocial termination clauses that is being proposed by this bill very much comes across as a patch to sort of go, look, we'll throw that in there, and you guys would just shut up about it. and I think what every landlord and every neighbor of tenants, who, neighbors generally are the ones at the receiving end of antisocial behaviors, and in fact, I am currently one such neighbor. So everyone needs to be aware of is it's not easily invoked. It can't be easily invoked because the way the bill talks about it is essentially a 3-strike regime. So there, not only does your tenant have to be antisocial, your tenant has to be antisocial on 3 separate occasions within a 90-day period. So if they're only antisocial twice, it's not going to work for you. So 3 times, 90-day periods. Each time, the landlord has to serve a notice, and there are requirements as to format and substance, which you all have to meet. Every single one of those notices is open to be challenged should the tenant wishes to challenge that notice at the tribunal. So you go through the system, you wait it out and go through the process that delays it even more, and then you start wondering, while you're challenging, how does the 90-day apply, that sort of stuff becomes tricky. In most instances, we just don't see how the tribunal can arrive at a fair outcome without getting evidence from the neighbor. So the neighbor would have to most likely front up to a hearing, support the notice, assume that the tribunal would rule that the notice is valid, and then after you've given 3 notices, I believe there's like a 28-day window during which you can apply for termination. And why is the 28-day window important? Because the anti-retaliatory clause that got inserted the last time the bill got amended means that right now tenants, and I think tenants should in good faith use that remedy, which is if a tenant believes that a landlord is terminating in retaliation of the tenant exerting or demanding a right under the RTA, then the tenant can seek relief from the tribunal. So I think which is creating a scenario where a lot of landlords, in order to have a clean termination process, it's not to say that they can't then terminate, but in order to have a clean, unequivocal termination process, they need the time to sort of make sure everything is fixed up in the property, just that they're squeaky clean. So that this issue is off the table. So that's why the 28-day could have potential implications for landlords seeking relief under the antisocial clauses. So look, it's a massive 3 hurdle you have to jump over, and on top of which, it is also putting your neighbors in a very untenable situation, because number one, you're assuming that these neighbors would feel comfortable enough to front up to a tribunal hearing, which could be very, very confronting. And don't forget, after they go through all of this, they still have to live next door to the antisocial tenant. And so there's that. If they don't front up and there's a witness summon out for them, the current RTA, the fine for not answering a witness summon is $2,000. Right. The bill is proposing to put that up to $3,600. Look, $2,000 or $3,600, they're all massive amounts, but to me, I just don't think it's good policy.
So that's what the neighbour could be charged for not turning up to the...
Yes,
Yeah.
and precisely for this reason, I think we should, out of decency, all be out there, tell our neighbours about it, and get them activated and involved in the process, because they have, as you can see, they have skin in the game.
So they've got a choice of either paying $3,000 and not turning up, and then paying that, or going there and sitting at the tribunal with the neighbours that they might have a fear. I mean, thinking of worse situation here.
Yeah.
They may have a fear of, or have continue to have antisocial stuff going on next door to them. It's a heck of a situation for any New Zealander there.
Yeah, and
really
I mentioned
40% of the homes in New Zealand are rented. So that's,
we could all be neighbours of tenants. Well,
Yeah.
and also I mentioned before to you that I am currently one such neighbour who is living next door to an antisocial tenant. So, and one of the considerations that I'm constantly weighing up is I'm a homeowner. Chances of me moving away and having my location become unknown to this neighbour is much lower than the renter moving away. Do you know what I'm saying? So from a safety point of view, we've always got to be like I said to Mark offline before, where I'm at right now, I'd rather pay the $3,600.
Yeah.
But that provides no relief to anybody here. So I put to people out there listening to this, the antisocial clause for termination, I don't think it's tenable. I don't think it protects the community or landlords from antisocial tenants.
Yep.
And it doesn't at all address the position that we have been putting forth for the last 2 years about how the 90-day notice is valid, because even though it is not often invoked, and in fact only 3% of tenants get a 90-day notice to terminate per year. So it doesn't happen a lot, but when it does happen, generally they happen because it is a relief to allow the landlords to peacefully transition out an antisocial slash threatening.
As a landlord, if you do have serious issues with a tenant doing that, if it takes 3 months of hopefully everything documented and dotted and T's crossed sort of thing, and get help from your neighbours and what have you, that's a heck of a lot of damage could be done to your property in the meantime.
Yeah, you're risking...
I'm just thinking from a landlord might be going, geez, I'm only to get 4 weeks bond, are the government going to pay another 2 months bond or something? In every case, I won't. But yeah, so the last 5 minutes what we spoke about here is hugely important, incredibly important for if these changes sort of come in for any New Zealander sitting there now. Everyone, no matter where you live, you're either got a tenant pretty close to where you live.
Yeah,
in fact,
exactly.
I'm living in a very good part of Auckland at the moment. I'm actually renting amongst having my investment property. I'm renting right now. It's lucky my neighbours have got of course, model citizens, Sarina. And my properties I've got in Auckland, I do know all the neighbours, and not all landlords do that. And I'm probably lucky because I do know the landlord, the neighbours. I know one in particular would definitely back me up in any situation. Another one might not though, because like yourself, they probably pay the $3,600.
Well, I put to you that most tenants wouldn't, and I could be wrong, but I just don't see a world where people will be inclined to get involved in issues when they don't necessarily always consider that they're party to the dispute, if that makes any sense.
Totally.
Like why take on trouble when you don't have to, and that's something. Look, I think one of the point I do want to raise in this video is the insidiousness of a lot of these changes. I think it's evading detection. It's going unnoticed because there's a lot of misinformation about the bill out there. In my experience, over the last, I want to say the bill's been live since middle of February. We're at middle of March. So, in my experience, over the last 3 weeks, not many people have actually read the bill or the explanatory notes, because who would want to do that unless you're a geek like me. And the talking points that Tenancy Services has put out there and also as well as some of the spins that's being out there by interested groups such as ourselves. Some of the information I think is very broad brush, to the point where it is misleading, and it doesn't. It sort of gives this sense of false security by saying, oh, don't worry about taking away the 90-day notice. Then you can still terminate if people are late on rent and antisocial. But what they don't tell you is, but we're going to make it so difficult for you to do it as to render these clauses meaningless in practice. So I think it's really important during this time to find a trusted source of information. It doesn't have to be us. I like it to be the Auckland Property Investors Association, because we put in an incredible amount of work understanding what the bill is saying, getting feedback from our members around how they're going to respond to the changes in a constructive manner. That doesn't mean that they're going to have to necessarily sell up or so on and so forth. So we've put out a lot of resources on what 218(1) means to landlords. I think the changes that are being proposed here are so sweeping, it is worth everybody's while. Even if you're not yet a landlord and you're thinking about buying rental properties in the near future, this is going to affect you, and you need to understand what additional risks you are going to be exposed to. Should we talk about some of the most common misinformation?
Yeah, and it's really important to see it's only a shortish window, and a lot of people are saying things out there. We aren't neither of us a financial advisor, and we're only speaking for what we say and we read and we understand ourselves. And as I said, what you've got great geeks like you in your organisation.
Sarina. Listen, I wish there are more honest brokers in this debate. That's what I wish.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So let's talk about some of the misinformations that are out there and what we think you think the actual the truths are is for someone that knows and read this amendment.
Well, I tell you what I'm really concerned about is right now everybody is obsessed about the coronavirus. You cannot open a single news app without reading about the coronavirus. Meanwhile, this is happening. This is having massive implications. It's going through the system, and I think more people need to pay attention to it. So, okay, misinformation. There are, frankly, some pretty alarming misfacts coming out from both sides of the debate. I just want to cover some of them. Yep. First of all, to spin that 218(1) is going to increase a tenant's control and empower the tenant, I think is a bad faith conclusion, because for some of these changes, the realistic response a landlord is going to make is either they're going to come to the conclusion that this is just too much risk for them to wear, that landlords, and we're getting this feedback from members as well, is that the landlords who choose to stay in the rental market will price the increased risk into the rents they charge. Yep. Or they're just going to take risky properties out of the rental pool. Either way, I think long term, we're looking at a less accessible rental market for tenants. We're looking at a higher entry fee for tenants. I think there's going to be good pricing power for tenants with immaculate records, and I think it's fair and I think it's great. But to say in a broad brush way that 218(1) is going to increase tenants' control and empower them, let's put it this way: if you take away security or tenure, any talk of control is meaningless. If tenants can't get into rentals, can't stay in rentals, what have they got to control? There's nothing. So just be mindful of that. Number two, this is a bad gripe. The suggestion that this law must come down hard on landlords by taking away the 90-day notice in order to rebalance the fairness of the system. The suggestion that landlords are out there every single day giving away 90-day notices willy-nilly, and this piece of legislation solves that problem is ludicrous, because first of all, we know for a fact 3% of tenants get a 90-day notice to terminate per year. So I don't know how 3% became the norm of the market. That's like someone's doing some funky maths. I don't know. And also the suggestion that the spin that's being put on it, that landlords wake up every day and all we think about is let's just terminate on our tenants without a reason. I mean, look, not having to state a reason isn't the same as not having a reason. So the issue is that 90-day notice is a remedy. Legal remedies are like healthcare, right? Like you hope like hell you're never gonna use it.
That's exactly right.
But when you need it, you like praise the Lord, it's there.
Yeah.
So it's that taking away that safety net, exposing people to further risks, and then having to push them into dramatically changing the way they run their rental business. That's gonna have real life consequences on not just themselves, their tenants, and the community at large. I think the discussion around that needs to be a little bit more honest than what it is being put out there at the moment. Now, a couple other things. I've been seeing a couple of suggestions online about this infringement offense regime, which will lead to criminalization of landlords, i.e. if you break certain parts of the IRTA, you're going to be convicted and become a criminal on record. Entirely false. Okay, so anyone who's telling you that and saying submit against the RTA because you don't want to be a criminal, they are lying to you. So the infringement, I mean, without really geeking out on this, think of the infringement offense regime as similar to that of a speeding ticket. What they're suggesting is now that I presume the TCIT, or they're probably going to set up another executive group, but I don't know. But they're going to be empowered to give you, if you breach and if you commit an infringement, they're going to give you a notice and a fine. So it's like a ticket. So you pay it and you move on. If you speed and you get a speeding ticket, you pay the ticket, but you're not a criminal for speeding. Yeah, so just that's important.
So if you do a submission, don't use that.
Don't use that
as a criminalisation as your defence.
Yeah, I think so, because I think you know when we well-reasoned outrage. Great.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And
don't just outrage.
but bad faith outrage or outrage that's reliant on misfacts and misinterpretation.
Non-factual.
No one's going to take you seriously. We talked about lifetime tenancy. I personally think the debate, the conclusion that 90-day plus fixed term is going to equal lifetime tenancy. I'm not convinced by that. By that chain of logic, I think it's threading the needle a bit. And once again, if you rely if the substance of your submission against it relies on something that essentially outlines the exception rather than the norm, once again, I think that sort of waters. Look, what I'm trying to say is there are plenty of pretty bad things in this bill for any reasonable person to make a cogent argument against it. As landlords, we don't need to be sort of stretching our sort of debate muscle and sort of find these odd cases and somehow misrepresenting them as a foregone conclusion. I don't think that's necessary. Like, once again, I'm just going to use the same phrase. I think we can all be honest brokers and push for a better policy outcome.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay,
jolly good. So it comes down to, we've talked about quite a lot of things in this conversation here, in particular the 90-day or the antisocial termination on the fixed term tenancy and how that all works. If someone wants to do a submission, they've got till 2 Wednesdays, the 25th of March. How and what do they do? And what do you give some tips on on what do they say? And
sure. Look, I'll be blunt. The purpose of this really is to activate as many of your listeners as possible to get involved. So if you don't mind, I sort of just want to talk a bit around why people should get involved and what's the virtue of civic engagement.
100%. And as I said, it's not something we want to happen. We want to have a perfectly good tenancy with all our properties we have, and we're only talking about that if this happens, if a bad situation happens with a bad tenant in there. This is what it's all about, and that's why we have to be prepared. We have to have it going, but it's fair for all parties. We're not, as a landlord, crucifying anyone. We
No.
want to make sure if it is a bad situation, we can look after our investment that helps New Zealanders in.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
agree. I think the problem is the narrative out there is that landlords are gaming from the system, which is from no, that's not happening. So look, what we're getting, we've been doing a lot of work around getting getting our audience engaged and activated and getting people sort of fired up enough to make a submission right to the MP, push back on the media a bit. I think and some of the feedback I've been getting, I sort of just want to have an opportunity to address that. So I've been getting some comments around, why should I bother? They've already decided on an outcome. Writing a submission is just going to go nowhere, which, by the way, if you do the maths, there are more tenants in New Zealand than there are landlords, i.e. there are more votes, and so whatever, it's just too hard, and I rather focus on finding the next deal. And look, totally valid, but I want to say, in terms of the number of tenants versus the number of landlords, look, if that is in fact true in practice and drives policy outcomes and formation of government, then I put to you that the process of election and other civil engagement is invalid, because then we don't need elections and other civil forms of engagement. We just go to the census data and work out who should form a government. Go to the census data and work out what's the best policy outcome, right? Decisions are made by people who show up. And what we really need to achieve at this point, because these changes are so sweeping and there's such real life consequences, I think it's time for landlords to show up. How long does it take to write a submission? You're not writing a novel. Nobody wants to read a novel. You just need to be putting down put into words what your concerns are vis-a-vis what the bill is proposing. What real life challenges these changes are going to create or exacerbate for you. How are you going to respond to these changes? Are you going to put your rent up? Are you going to take your property out of market? Are you going to straight away terminate on all of your tenants and re-vet all of them while you still can? What are you going to do to ring fence yourself from the effects of these changes? And what is that going to mean to your portfolio, your tenants, and the community at large? And finally, wrapping up, for those who are that way minded, what recommendations do you have for this government to make this a more robust piece of legislation? So we're not talking about, war and peace. We're talking about really short statements that you can make in less time it takes to find out who won, I don't know, this week's MasterChef competition. So, I personally think it's really worthwhile. And I think to the cynics out there who has lost faith in the system, please do not lose faith in the system. I think that the system is only as robust as the number of people who engage in it in good faith. I'll give you an example. Last year there was an omnibus tax bill that introduced ring fencing for rental losses. And again, anecdotally, we're getting a lot of people saying, ring fencing is terrible, especially for the sort of new to the market investors and the would-be investors, because as you would know better than me, to be able to have tax relief from the losses, it isn't a business goal. Nobody gets into rental investment to make losses.
That's right.
But it is a relief that you can rely on that allows you to progress.
Especially when you start out.
Especially. So it was just so widely panned and everyone hated it so much. But when we go back to and it's all online, when we go back to the bill's website and look at the number of submissions, do you know how many people submitted out of 5 million New Zealanders? Do you know how many submissions were received?
Not many, I guess.
363.
That's it.
363 submissions. Companies/people in New Zealand bothered to put in a submission, and when we examined a sample of 80 of them, we estimate that there's maybe around 100 to 110 submissions against ring fencing. So look, if only 100, if
everyone's as you said, pitching and moaning and complaining about it. So.
I'm an MP, and I go, okay, I want to be re-elected. I want to serve the people of New Zealand, and I want to act in the interest of the people of New Zealand. And I'm looking at this piece of legislation that says let's ring fence rental tax losses, but out of 5 million people, only 110 people say, oh, it's a terrible idea. What are you going to conclude? You know, if I vote for this bill, only 100 people out of 5 million is going to hate me.
So don't let that happen again with
Don't
us.
let that happen again. Look, the REINZ recently put out some numbers which I think is terribly interesting. 82% of New Zealanders do not agree with removing the 90-day notice to terminate. They want it there. They want to keep it there. 82%. If 82% of New Zealand, if only 1% of that 82% of New Zealanders bother to write down why they don't want it,
that'd be massive.
that is 41,000 submissions against, which will all be posted online because they have to. That's 41,000 in an election year. Even if the select committee goes through 41 submissions and still don't get the message, or they're just such ideologues that they still say, yes, let's go through with taking away 90-day notice, then they're coming up to an election. I think it becomes very legitimate for the voting public to confront these MPs and say, hey, you saw this, you still push it through. How then do I have faith in you that you are here for the people, not just here to run for another term? So I think, look, just being, it matters. It matters, it's important. It's not, no one gets into property investment to make submissions, talk to the MP, that sort of stuff. But I just put to you guys out there are real life consequences. These changes are super sweeping. I think there's a lot of forces out there that doesn't want to go into the nitty-gritty details of this bill, because what they are hoping for, and coronavirus is helping them out on this, is they're hoping that they could just quietly pass this bill.
It's going to be one of those bills, as I said, it makes it, we spoke about before, this is extremely hard to remove a tenant if they deserve to, I guess, and most people would say deserve to be removed for a particular thing that they're doing. So
and the danger is, I really think the danger is they'll pass this bill quietly, and then come September, August time, they're going to spin this as a win for tenants and activate an electorate, a voting base. And we've had many very experienced investors who's been in the market for 20, 30 years. And I think you might have even said similar stuff to me in the past as well. Many of these people who's been through successive governments, their conclusion is, if the current formation of this government continues, this isn't it. They're not going to stop here. These changes are going to keep coming. And I think this practice of grievance politics, where policies are being decided by sensationalized newspaper headlines with no concrete numbers, it's got to stop. And
I mean, we read in the paper last week, a week before, this last 12 months has been the biggest rent increase in Auckland ever.
Have you read in the paper yesterday from, I won't name the name, but a reputable outlet, that quoting a tenant group saying that vis-a-vis the rent increases, that landlords are using the 2181 as an excuse. I'm hoping people can see me using quotation marks. Excuse to increase rent.
Yeah, but one thing you said earlier on, though, which is exactly to the point, and I've seen it over the last year and a half with all the healthy homes and what have you, and I'm in for making homes healthier and what have you, but I guess the current government have piled so much all at the same time on landlords, where landlords have went, well, it's way too hard, so they're selling up, and now if they don't have their older home up to all the standards right now, that's an issue, and they can get fined, sort of thing. So they are selling. So a lot of the older properties where tenants can afford are being sold, and as you said, there's a lot of landlords don't want to be landlords, so there's less of a pull for them to move in, and new builds are now, they're healthy homes, and they're all those other things that you need with it. They're newer, they're more expensive for tenants, and as you said, what rights have tenants got if they don't have a place to live in? And it's just going to increase that again. It's not so much the rents have gone up, It's just the quality of the places are better now for tenants, which equals paying a bigger rent. That's sort of how I see it from my
look,
point of view. And this is going to even make that more landlords sort of kick their properties into touch because
I
it's too
agree.
hard.
I agree, and I think from a messaging point of view as well, I think it's problematic to sort of completely disregard the cost side of the debate because, in response to that article I was mentioning to you before about tenants complaining that 2181 is being used as an excuse to put rent up and that they're therefore distrustful of the integrity of every rent increase. Like, in what world does an increase in risk and an increase in cost equal a lower in product price? I don't know. Again, someone's doing some funky maths.
Yeah.
I certainly didn't go to the same school. So I think, what I'm personally terribly disappointed about is a lot of the sort of public discourse that's mainly driven by the media is reliant on the sensationalized headlines, and that's a lot of it is propped up by people with a feeling. The tenant group that got quoted yesterday, they didn't point to any numbers.
Yeah.
They just said, we feel that many landlords are out there giving 90-day notices every day so that they don't have to fix our property. Many, 3%. 3% is many in what world? I don't know. So look, and I think this is definitely, like I said, it's creating a cultural grievance-based politics that is, as we can see now, having real life consequences on landlords. So to everyone out there listening, small window, please submit. I have some tips. Can I share the tips?
Share the tips.
Don't miss the deadline.
25th.
25th,
Look at
midnight.
the links on the website.
Yeah,
click on it.
And look, I'm despite my age group, I'm inherently distrustful of IT. So don't leave it till the last minute. The website could crash. Don't do that. There are two ways to submit. You can use the web form, or you can post a submission in. The select committee openly advertises its email address. Don't email them the submission unless they believe that you have a very good reason not to post in or use the web form. They're not going to accept an email submission, so don't email them. Web form, two ways to go about as well. Number one, you can put all your submission down in the form of a letter that's a bit more free form, that gives you a bit more sort of ability to sort of narrate your challenges in the format that suits you. Then type it out in a Word document. You can upload it as one single document. Or if you don't want to do that, after you go through, like putting in your personal details, that sort of stuff, you just have to answer two questions. So I believe one of them is like, what's your feedback? Like, what do you think about the changes? And you can sort of go through, look, I've been a landlord for X number of years, I look after X number of tenants, these changes, I'm particularly concerned about these elements of the bill. This is what I'm going to do in response to, if it does become law, I'm going to, put rent up, take properties out of the rental pool, whatever. These are the consequences. And so that's question number one. Question number two is what recommendations you have for the bill. So when you are making recommendations, just be mindful of the overarching bill that they purport to be trying to achieve: security of tenant, empowerment of tenants, modernization of New Zealand rental law. So do you see an alternative pathway to achieving that without diminishing too much of landlords' rights? Because ultimately we're here to preserve I think what's really important is the concept of fairness vis-a-vis the residential rental in New Zealand is so distorted at the moment that instead of talking about rental system being fair, I actually prefer to talk about us standing for a rental system that is just as fair for landlords as it is for tenants. Because I think the concept, fairness is such a word that's being thrown around so much that and the people throwing around using this word, it's a powerful word because it invokes feelings in all of us, that the people using these words a lot, relying on them, they seem to be either blind to or uninterested in the challenges of a landlord. Meanwhile, they're incentivized to sort of play up the challenges of tenant and that in and of itself, look, it's being spun into a weird concept out there. So just be mindful of that. Oral submissions, I think oral submissions are really great. If you use the web form, you have the opportunity to select whether you want to give an oral submission or not.
Okay.
Definitely encourage anybody who is that way inclined to pick a yes. And APIA, we're going to do some workshop/clinics to help people prepare for the oral submission. So we're going to put sessions together where you can come along, read out your oral statement. We're probably going to put out like a mock panel, and they will ask you questions so you know what to be mindful of, and that's a good opportunity for you to dialogue with a politician, challenge some of their thinkings, answer their questions, and sort of cover it in a more broad-based manner. Finally, do not copy and paste someone else's submission. That's precisely the reason we haven't provided a template out there, because those templates, they just get completely ignored. Those templates say to the select committee that this person putting in the template has not enough skin in the game and not invested enough in the issue. Therefore, why should I listen to him or her? So do not copy someone else's. It's not rocket science. No one is expecting you to do a Shakespeare on this.
And the great thing is you've just given quite a few ways you can actually do it, and I know some people are out there, and like me, for some other submissions I should have done in the past where you're busy and you go, it's just all too hard to do sort of thing. As I said, one, you go online there and it's the two questions, and answering those as well as you can. The more information the better. But answering those two things, and that's as a minimum, if you do that as an absolute minimum here, and we get another 2,000 people doing that, that's really important. And I'll put my hat on this time, and I will be, because I know how terrible this, from my point of view, is.
I tell you what I'll be doing. I will
be
auditing the submission.
Check it out.
I am going to go through all of them. I'm going to name check everybody.
Oh, good. So if you want to join APIA ever, should do a submission. No.
I'm going to price into our membership for those people. No, I'm not doing that. But it's important. I want to say thanks so much for having me. I don't like doing this. This isn't my natural habitat, and I would like it to stop. But it is important enough for me to ring up a bunch of our partners and say, hey guys, we need to get this information out there. We need to activate people.
And we think, again, it's that important that we're doing this as a podcast here and trying to share it out to as many people, because it is really important. And we'll just have a date on the on our email this week. The people on our email list, we will either Monday or Tuesday after you see, or Monday or Tuesday week after you see this, have an event in our office in Ponsonby where you can just come and talk.
Can I come?
You're going to be our main speaker.
Yes.
You're coming in.
Yes. Okay.
And it'll just be an idea to just I guess vet your frustrations, or maybe help on how to do this.
Listen, I'm not going to be here to be an agony aunt, but because I'm not good with feelings. But what I've definitely geeked out on this bill, rang our lawyer many times, hounded her many times. And so what I still think there is so much misinformation out there about this bill that is making people either, number one, don't know / don't care about it, or number two, think that they are not going to be affected by it. Most of us will be affected by this badly. So what I will happily make myself available to any PV clients to come explain in plain English what this bill is saying. I'm also running submission workshops for APIA members, where I'm happy to go through your submission, give you some feedback, just make it a little bit more sort of readable, constructive, that sort of stuff. So we'll definitely focus on getting the right information out there, getting people activated, support you through the submission process. Especially, I think the first couple of times you write submissions, it is quite an intimidating process. Yeah. You know? So and it's not like, listen, if people like me can do it, anyone else can do it.
So we're making it easy as we can for everyone.
Definitely. And also, guys, don't forget, we're running a fact checker on the APIA website. which I think will be linked in the show notes as well. So the fact checker really is designed for people who sort of go, look, I don't really want to spend too much time on this. I'm not interested. I'm not that way inclined. What do I need to know? The fact checker is really good because it just sort of puts on there some commonly made statements about 2181.
So you've got any frequently asked questions, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll just go true, false, maybe. And if you want to read more, click on the link, you can read more.
Yeah. Okay. Great stuff. Hey, thank you very much, Sarina, coming
Thank you for having
and talking
me.
to us and enlightening everyone here. And it's not a scare tactic. It's just this is something really serious and it's make the world a better place by not letting this go through. Because it's going to be a headache for a heck of a lot of people, and I can see other side things will come from it, which could cause more stress between a tenant and a landlord with this new rule.
Yeah,
so I can see it being a really bad situations occurring that don't happen maybe now.
I don't see how this is set up in a way that encourages landlords and tenants to continue existing in the rental system with any good faith. Yep. I just don't see it.
So don't just think here and listen to this and think, oh, that's all nice and that's a bit of a bugger. Do something about it. We've got all the links beside on how you're listening or watching this to do that, or email us at Property Ventures and we'll help you with that. So thank you very much. We'll be back again. No worries, but a pleasure again. You'll be back. Listen again in 2 weeks to the next podcast of either great educational or controversial stuff, or if we need a hand like we do this time. So thanks again for watching and listening, and we'll see you again soon.